Okay, this is Emmy Thomas, and I'm talking again to Victoria. We have two topics I think that we're going to talk about. Victoria said she has some thoughts about. So, the first one's going to be Amber Heard, the Amber Heard trial, I guess, which I just learned that there is Marilyn Manson now has filed a defamation suit against Evan Rachel Wood, kind of a similar thing. So, I think this is getting interesting. Like I wonder if this is going to be a trend or something of this type of thing happening. And it's interesting to see people be so black and white. They're like, no, Johnny Depp was a victim. This is not at all similar, or they were friends, and they're, like people just have like a lot of certainty about that. So that's been really interesting to me. We'll hear Victoria's thoughts, and then we'll talk a little bit about intuition, which is something that I kind of associate in a kind of a religious, spiritual way, but I know that other people don't. Arya doesn't for sure. She just talks about things being highlighted in her mind and stuff. So I always think it's really interesting to talk to other people to kind of realize it's both, I think, a very common experience, but I think also an individual experience. But let's start first talk about Amber Heard. So
Have
what?
you watched the trial at all?
No, I watched some clips. I watched like the clip where, they're showing her audio or something of her being like, what does she say? Like, oh, you're gonna tell the whole world that some girl abused you or
Yeah,
whatever.
you, Johnny Depp, is a
Yeah, that was a
victim
pretty
of
like,
domestic violence.
yeah, damning one. And she was like, I did not hit you, I slapped you. I was like, well, that's
No,
like,
I did not punch you. I was hitting you.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that sort of stuff. So you're kind of like, well, that does sound like an admission. So I don't the whole thing, I'm pretty agnostic because I didn't invest enough time to have any confidence. And I like to think that I don't really know what's happening in the private
Yeah,
lives of others
yeah.
because I don't think I do, right? And if I were to kind of be as confident as some of these people on Twitter, for instance, I just don't know where they're getting that from. Like they just are like, no, this is definitely how it happened, and anyone who disagrees is like not in reality or whatever. So
Well, a few years ago, they said that about that being guilty. So,
about who being guilty?
Johnny Depp.
Oh yeah, yeah. Where they were like certain that he was
Yeah.
guilty. Yeah. That is one thing that I kind of like about this whole thing is like, I was just listening to, do you know Jacob Collier, the musician?
No.
I only know him through like the weirdest ways. You'd think I would have found out about him though, because I do like certain people that he associated acts, let's say like Herbie Hancock or whatever, some of these jazz musicians have really, I guess, kind of helped him a lot. He's kind of like a savant musician, like self-taught, and so there's like just a lot of interesting originality in his music. So he's kind of talking about like his music, right? And then he said was talking about the pandemic and how he had like a tour planned or something, and then he had to postpone the tour. And then he was kind of talking about the online world, which he had benefited originally from the online world because he was just throwing up his recordings on YouTube, I guess, and some of these other online things, and he kind of got like, I guess, viral fame before he got noticed by the music industry. So he kind of owes his career, I guess, in a way to those features. But then he was just talking about how the online world, everybody's just so certain about things, and he just
Yeah.
thinks that it's like arrogance and kind of hubris to think that like the amount of certainty that you have about stuff that's inherently uncertain. And I find that to be like a really disturbing trait, not just in the online world, but like I guess you mostly see it online, but even kind of like Roe v. Wade, for instance. Like I know we're not getting
Yeah.
into this,
Mm-hmm.
but like as an attorney and kind of like studying the law, the theory, and people can kind of just Google this and like see for themselves the criticism, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg criticized this and for American jurisprudence, Roe v. Wade, on the grounds of substantive due process. Right, procedural due process is super well established. It's like written into the Constitution. Substantive due process is like made up. Like it's it's kind of always had really shaky grounds is probably the best way to put it, where it's like,
Yeah.
was just this just something that somebody made up and then wanted to like stare decisis it forever. And you're just kind of like, eventually, if you pretend that something's true and it's not true, it's like that center will not hold, is what I've noticed. So I told you that I went to go see a musical last night, and part
Mm,
of it too was about the Russian Revolution, right? Like one of the characters goes through the Russian Revolution, and you kind of think about that too. Like it was just interesting the way that it was portrayed as, this is like the people now own these things and you stole from us, and like this is your diamond. No, it's not your diamond, it's our diamond. Like we work and died in the mines, and it's like, well, you didn't work and die in the mines, otherwise you wouldn't be talking. But this like way of identifying with like a group of people and being like, we did this, we did that, or something. You don't earn this because we were the ones. And just kind of like the ideology, like if you get too far from actual reality, I just always think the center will not hold. Like eventually there's going to be a collapse, and there just wasn't like enough alignment with objective reality there in that particular communist socialist movement for there to be, long lasting anything. So, yeah, like what is the phrase? The truth will out. Yeah. So I always think about that.
Truth will prevail.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the truth will out. I think it might be Shakespeare. Maybe I always hear it said that way, but it doesn't make sense. Really, it's not good English, or it doesn't. It's old English, maybe. Yeah, but yeah, with Roe v. Wade, and I think about this sort of stuff with like, yeah, Johnny Depp gets, everybody's certain like, oh, like kick him out of such and such movie. Like, didn't he get kicked out of the Harry Potter franchise?
Yes, Fantastic Beast, and
Mhm.
also the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, and this is getting really political, but I too like, people can put in the comments what J.K. Rowling things that they thought were like transphobic.
Oh,
But I keep
yeah.
trying to look for the one that I think is transphobic, and I think
I don't think she is, which is
it's
bummer.
interesting, yes, because I a similar kind of thing. You just hear people, they don't even say the joke anymore. They just say it was whatever. So somebody else was commenting about how Heath Ledger had refused to joke at the Oscars when Brokeback Mountain came out. So I think this was the Oscars of 2006. He and Jake Gyllenhaal were doing like a little, introduction of something else, and they had put in a joke about like gay cowboys. And at that time there were a lot of jokes with about gay cowboys, and they said that, yeah, it was a homophobic joke. And I thought, well, is it the fact that it's about gay cowboys, or is it the fact that it's a joke? Like, what is the homophobic part? Like, just kind of like it was like you can't joke about gay cowboys, or you can't joke in this context because it's a love story that's a tragedy, or like what is the thing that people think is like the whatever phobic? Like
Yeah, and whatever happened at Oscar with Will Smith.
oh, uh-huh.
Yeah, now we can't joke about anything.
Oh yeah, yeah, because we're worried about getting smacked on stage.
Yeah, and culture appropriation and
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. There was like when the Ukraine war invasion started, some people were like, now we'll have like real things to fight about instead of fake things. But it is kind of weird. You're like, why aren't we happier right now? We have like so much going on that's good, but people do kind of want to get pissed and fight about stuff. Like, I love Chick-fil-A, and people are always being like, no, I will never be happy until Chick-fil-A is scrubbed off the face of the planet. And I'm like, why not just ignore that Chick-fil-A exists and just let me have Chick-fil-A? And in exchange, I will let you have the things that you love, that I find problematic or whatever. Like, why why are we so kind of worried about what other people think and do and believe or something?
yeah,
And yeah, I just too. I like read this morning because I had insomnia, right? About there's a 10-year-old girl. This is kind of like reported in who knows. I mean, it's just kind of breaking and mostly just people commenting about it without actual sources. But a 10-year-old girl was denied an abortion in Ohio, and like she is, at least in the article, they said that she was raped or sexually abused, and you're like, this kind of seems crazy. Like, what's going on in Ohio? But then she just went to Indiana, which is like maybe an hour away, or the top,
Mm.
like the most far it could be away from Ohio, based on my limited geography of the Midwest, is maybe like 5 hours away. And then you're like, yeah, this is kind of a sad story. And so I guess this is what motivates people to be like, I don't like it when people have other beliefs, is because then sad things can happen. In the law, we have a legal maxim that says hard cases make bad law, which is basically like, in some of these sad stories, if you decide in favor of the plaintiff because they have such a sad story, you
Mm.
end up coming up with a rule that doesn't really work.
Mm.
So a good example is one of my friends said that her aged mother, who's like in her 90s, the mom is, had hurt her hip, I think, or her femur. There was like a hairline fracture. And so like the mom lives with the sister, but then the sister wanted to go on vacation. And so my friend had to go up and watch the mom for like 10 days, 14 days. And my friend was like, yeah, you'd expect that we could have just gotten like home health care, but the home health care say that you can't, they won't accept anybody that's not load bearing, I think, and it's kind of funny to refer to people as load bearing. Like if they're not able to support their own weight, then no, because the home health, and the answer was because there's just so much liability. Like if the, home health care person tried to like help them up and down from the toilet, for instance, because they needed assistance and there was an accident and they slipped, then the person's going to sue the home healthcare person, and so that's why we can't have any home healthcare people doing that. And I was like, huh, well, what's the point of the home healthcare
Wow.
people if not to do this? But it's like you can just imagine, like my little lawyer brain, like flashback to like learning a bunch of cases like this in law school, where there's always a first case where so it happens, like the home healthcare person like dropped the person, and then it shattered their hips, and then they never recovered and they died like 2 months later, where you're just like, well, it's so sad for the person who died, and they should get compensation. And then you just need a few of those cases to where the home healthcare people are like, fine, we didn't want to carry you around anyways. So if you keep suing us for this and winning, we just won't do it anymore. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Will it ever get to the point like in China when they see victim of
yes,
accident and they don't do anything because they don't want to be sued?
yes, yeah. Or you hit somebody and it's actually cheaper. This is what I've read, at least in
Yeah.
certain instances in China, yeah, where they just run people over to kill them because it's cheaper
Yes.
to kill them. So it is hard because, like, and this is like a real tangent I feel like we're on. I feel like I'm giving a small little legal lecture, but they're like in the law there's like this idea of discretion is good, uh, but there's a trade-off. Like discretion for judges is good because they can tailor make the law to the particular situation. But the problem with discretion is everybody's biased, right? Everybody has prejudices, everybody has heuristics, everybody has cognitive limitations. And so the more kind of discretion you give people, the more kind of haywire it can get, or kind of uneven, or unbalanced, or inequitable, right? So when people kind of online are like, no, this is black and white, right or wrong, I'm always like, you're just kind of ignoring intentionally that the world is just really complicated,
Yeah.
and if we do this in this situation, it will have repercussions, and, we'll like shift the incentive. So people are going to act in this way differently instead. You see it a lot in the abortion debate on both sides, where people are like, um, just asserting, like, no, this is going to be fine. This is not going to be create any problems at all.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the morality palette
The
thing.
morality what?
Palette.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt.
Uh-huh. So they have like, what is it? The 5 or 6 different
Yeah,
moralities.
six different morality.
Do you
And
remember what they are? One of them's purity, fairness, justice. Are these right?
yeah, let me look it up. And I don't know how people are so sure that they know the whole truth just from the small snippets that they see from like celebrities or YouTubers or people they don't even know in
Yeah.
real life, just from the small, like maybe not even 1% of their entire life that you see, you think that you know what's happening.
Yeah. And two, kind of being on, so a quick story about this. My dad is like also a lawyer, right? And
Yeah.
he insists that he has to meet his client, a potential client first, because he's such a good judge of character that he'll know if they're good or not. So he won't do like Zoom, phone. No, he has to meet them in person so he can get the real measure of the man or
Yeah.
the woman
So what?
before.
So he can like feel the aura
Yeah, I guess.
physically.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, and being on kind of the other side of the law, where I know in any trial, there's like a bunch of different evidentiary disputes happening, where stuff is either being let in or not let in, right? Like that's just constantly the entire trial is like, is this going to get let in or is this not going to get let in? And to think that you kind of know because you've seen even a trial is like, well,
Yeah.
like you're just being shown this kind of filtered version of whatever the judge thinks is admissible evidence based
Yeah.
on all sorts of like really old evidentiary rules that have never really been empirically tested for their assumptions. So I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Okay. I pull up the 6 morality. So first one is care, and then fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity.
What's the last one?
The pureness, I think. No. Yeah. Sanctity.
Sanctity? Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Sanctity.
Yeah, that it's interesting loyalty. I That's the one that always surprises me because I'm not a naturally super loyal person. So when people are like, "Oh no, I have to
Yeah, like
cover,"
sports teams.
yeah, yeah, and I just heard about this kind of like crazy thing, where like like the husband's been accused of all this kind of like bad doing, including sexual abuse of children, and then the wife is kind of standing by the husband. So this is
Oh,
also the the Duggar family, right? Josh Duggar, I think, like got convicted of a bunch of child porn, but had already been accused by several people, his babysitters, his old babysitters, and his
it's
sisters.
very common. Yeah.
Yeah, being sexually abused, but then the wife is like staying with him, and
I think there might be many different factors behind
r-
cases like this. So
yeah,
one is financial responsibility, and then
yes,
social status, and
yeah.
also um, trying to shield yourself from reality.
Interesting. Yeah, that you say that because this other case that I know of, kind of very similar case, the guy's currently staying with his mom, and you're just kind of like, what's going on there? Like, what's up with this mom? Like, yeah, innocent until proven guilty and stuff. So you're like, but just part of you gets like a little red flag, like, what's happening here between the mom and the son? Not anything sexual, but just kind of like this idea of loyalty and like people being like, no matter what you would do, I would, like protect you because you are my son or whatever else is like something that kind of is not something I understand very well.
Unconditional love.
Yeah, I mean, unconditional love is different though. Like where they'll actually though kind of facilitate. Oh, another good example is kind of like imagine like Ghislaine Maxwell type stuff, where the person is like actually contributing to the thing. And I mean, I think Ghislaine Maxwell is probably like messed up in her own right or whatever. Like I don't think she was just like I love Jeff Epstein so much that I'm gonna do this for him or like so loyal to him or whatever. But I've like kind of seen or heard about other situations where somebody's like, no, this is okay. Because I'm just so loyal to this person, I will go down this weird, I'll break bad with them in order to just maintain this sort of loyalty, sort of Bonnie and Clyde type stuff. Anyways, let's get back though. So that's a little bit kind of what I've taken from the Amber Heard trial, but what have you taken from the Amber Heard trial?
It's interesting how public's opinion changed. I remember a few years back when Johnny Depp lost the UK trial.
Mm-hmm.
I watched the trial too, and it's just a lot of facial expression and like body language that's telling me that Amber Heard is probably not telling the truth.
Uh-huh.
But at the time, no one would listen to what I thought because everyone was just so closed off from the possibility that Johnny Depp might also be a victim or he
Right.
might be innocent. And it's just very surprising to me that all of a sudden everyone is citing Johnny.
That's why kind of, and this is good. This is more connected to the topic of intuition than
Mm-hmm.
than maybe we originally thought because like I'll get kind of like ideas or whatever where I'm like, this is my true idea and it's definitely not like everybody else is on board. Like, what would be a good one that's really unpopular now is I'm like pedophiles have a disorder, right? And they shouldn't act on it, and they should be, like same consequences for acting on it as other people, etc. But like to just kind of ignore pedophilia and be like, let's just hope they don't act on it, but they better not speak up and try to get help because otherwise we'll just put them in prison just for having it, just
Yeah.
for having the pedophilia. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense, guys. Like, you're basically incentivizing them to just white knuckle it until they finally break down and do something to
Mm-hmm.
a small child. And that blood is on their hands, yes, but it's on your hands too, because you guys were the ones that made it impossible for them to try to seek any sort of help about this.
Yes.
Right. So I have some spicy opinions that like are not shared, but I think eventually they will be. I'm kind of like, it's got to be that this is eventually going to be something that's accepted. I don't want to like brag too much about other things that I feel like I've prognosticated. Is that the word? That I've been basically Nostradamus over here about. But people are talking about like a recession too, and I'm like, nah, there's not going to be a recession. I don't think, despite the interest rates going up, because the labor market is still like not fully engaged and just like the invasion of Ukraine could end at any moment or whatever. So unless yeah, everyone's like, no, there's definitely going to be this or that or something. I'm like, why? How? Like the one thing that we know definitely will happen is that there's another pandemic, but nobody seems to care about that. So I'm kind of used to like people kind of saying
Yes.
definitely about stupid stuff where it's like, no, we don't know that at all. And then
Yeah.
ignoring other things where they're like, I mean, like, think about it. Believe women, right? That's just the rule. Like believe women, and the most hilarious thing is like believe women when it was Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh accusers, but don't believe women when it's President Joe Biden accusers. You're like, huh? So why you have this rule?
It's very interesting to me how public opinion is formed because
Yeah,
most of them makes no sense to me.
yeah, and they don't kind of question it too. Like they
They
just
yeah,
like,
they don't, and they like to like jump on a bandwagon hating on someone like, hello, you guys the one that brag about empathy being important. Why not have empathy for people with problematic behavior?
yeah,
Think about what's going on to have driven those people doing like all these presumably bad things.
Yeah, it's interesting because even like thinking about that Brokeback Mountain joke or whatever, like at the time those jokes were like totally funny. And if you watch like a decade ago SNL, like it's so like what people would consider problematic, but everybody just kind of memory holes that they ever laughed at that or that they ever,
Mhm.
thought that they ever participated in something like that. And they're just like, no, those people were all monsters, but I wasn't one of them for some reason. I
Mm.
just came down here from a UFO. I've only been here for a year, Like they like so conveniently forget, like those were their beliefs. And so it's hilarious because you'll get people like my friend Anne from the book was just talking about this, about like how her opinions have changed. I forget what it was about. And she's like, a lot of people have been pushing back on her, or maybe it was opinion about pandemic things have changed. And they're like, no, if you were this, then you should always say this. And she's like, well, the pandemic has changed. The everything kind of changes. Like, but people are kind of like, it's so weird to watch them do it because they're so certain, and then they'll change to something completely opposite and be just as certain about that, and just kind of memory hole that their previous belief
Oh,
even existed.
you know what? There's been a study done where the participants were given out a survey form to write down their political belief or something opinion.
Hmm.
And then 6 months later, they changed their answer to the opposite side and then handed back to the participants and asked them if they feel the same. And they would say, they will look at the author answer and say, yeah. And they'll make up excuses to support what they thought that they have written down 6 months ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I'm always interested in stuff like that. It's not to say that we are not irrational people as psychopaths or whatever. I'm sure we're irrational in all sorts of ways. We have our own blind spots. In fact, I just saw like a comment or something on a YouTube thing which was like, like I don't like to listen to just the psychopaths talk about like how stupid they think empaths are. And I don't mean it to be that. I don't mean it to be that, but it is just different to talk to you versus talking to somebody else. My own pleasure is, like, well, I like to do both, frankly. I talk to normal people a lot. And I rarely get to talk to other like-minded people. So, maybe these particular conversations in which I'm talking to psychopaths are not for you, and that's okay. It's okay for something to not be for you. Oh, that's
Yes.
another reminder. Do you know the movie Mystic Pizza? Have you seen
No.
it? I watched it on the plane recently. And at first I was like really charmed. The first 20 minutes I was like, this is fun, it's funny or something. And then I was like talking to some like middle-aged white dude about it, and he was like, yeah, that movie was terrible. And I know that it's terrible because I'm the target audience for that movie and I didn't like it. And I was like, huh. I just got done telling you that I thought that the movie was really charming, the first half or whatever. And you're trying to tell me that you're the target audience? And that's how you know it's terrible, right? I think stuff like that's weird too, like where like you assume everything for you, and you're like, but I don't like it. I don't like coffee ice cream. Therefore, coffee ice cream is bad. There should not be coffee ice cream or whatever. It's I don't
Yeah,
know.
let people do their thing, let them like what they like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know people care so much. Yeah, so this reminds me of my sister-in-law ex-boyfriend was visiting,
Uh-huh.
and then we took them to climbing, indoor bouldering.
Uh-huh.
And so our local climbing gym is very pro LGBT, so you will see a lot of like queer people in there. So when we got out of there, he was just saying like, I don't understand, are these people like so traumatized in their childhood that they are like guys wearing black nail polish and eyeshadow? Like, why are you doing that? Do you know that everyone is judging you when you do that? And I was like, oh, who cares? Just let them do what they like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did it affect you in any way?
Yeah. How does it affect them? But you'll get too, I mean, the flip where people are be like, because it was so American. This particular video clip I watched, I was like, wow, how American could like do people of other countries even understand what's happening in this video clip? And it was this they're all kind of surrounded by like they're surrounding a big truck, like these like a dually whatever diesel truck or something. And then do you know what it is to blow smoke? I had to learn this too.
No.
Blow smoke means you intentionally cause, there's something that you can do to intentionally cause the diesel truck to like emit like a lot of black smoke from
Oh,
from the exhaust. And so they're intentionally blowing smoke, and so it's really loud too. Like the whole process is really loud. And there's this woman who's pregnant. She's probably like 6 or 7 months pregnant. So she's looking at the truck, and then there's this dude with a mullet behind her, like trucker hat or something, total like plaid shirt, bootcut jeans, Carhartt boots. Right? And she turns to look at the truck, and the truck blows smoke, and it's like blue, right? And then while she's turning to look, he like gets down on one knee with a ring, and then she turns around and she's like, "I knew it was a boy," and he like is proposing, right? So I was like, "Wow, this is very American." this this particular thing. And I also thought like some people would probably be like, this is like ignorant, or like be kind of judging this, like this is bad, or whatever, would have like a
what?
bad reaction, same as the black fingernail reaction to this, where it's
Yeah,
like, like how, these people are baddies somehow. And I'm like, well, like they're just doing their own thing or whatever. Like I don't get why we're trying to internalize so much what's external to us, is like a good way to put it.
yeah, that's probably what's going on with the trial, Hart versus Depp trial. You know
Hmm.
what? When I watch it, I actually have a lot of I don't know, sympathy or empathy for Amber Heard, because
Yeah.
I see a lot of my past self or past behavior in her, and I would like to think that I've already gotten out of the loop, and it's just sad to watch someone still in the loop.
Yeah. So maybe like what sort of behaviors did you recognize in her?
Um, so one thing, this is just my interpretation, might not be what's going on,
Of course,
but
everything's just our
yeah,
interpretation. Yeah,
yeah,
we have our own personal realities going
yeah.
on.
I just have to make this clear so that people should be aware that what they interpret is probably not the truth.
Yeah, equally valid to them potentially, but equally maybe not connected to
Yeah,
reality as yours.
yeah. And I'm not claiming that I think mine is the truth or whatever. Anyway, so I used to think that I could act myself out of a committed mistake.
Hmm.
Like I think that if I try so hard, I can just manipulate everyone to be
Like
on my side.
the entire world.
Yes. And I think that there must be a way if I'm just not seeing it. If I fail, it's just that I did not do good enough, or the other person is doing better than me, that I will just not accept the fact that it's just not doable.
Yeah. So you kind of saw that in Amber Heard. In like what ways would you see it?
So she tried very hard to convince people that she's the sole victim in this relationship. You know how it's just a lot of small things, like she kept looking at the jury and people say maybe the lawyers told her to do that, and she's very conscious of when the media is taking photos, like she would fake cry and then pause for people to take photo of her fake crying
Hmm.
while giving testimony.
Yeah.
And but what stood out to me most is she actually got really emotional when they were reading the text messages from Johnny Depp that said he wished she was dead. That was actually pure emotion, that she was actually sad when she heard that he wished her dead.
Uh-huh.
But the other like testimony giving is just too fake to me.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I've been thinking about this. The last conversation I had, one of these Zoom conversations, was, I think I labeled it Sociopath Lessons Part One, and I was talking to Tony about like kind of this inner impulse to people please, like, and where does it come from? And it's like associated with kind of this self-consciousness. So sometimes I kind of get that vibe from people where I'm like, with Amber Heard, I looked at her outfits and I was like, she definitely went shopping to have this many outfits. Like, I'm an attorney and I have probably like 8 suits or whatever. That's an unusual amount of suits, I think,
Yes.
for a woman.
And also she tried to mirror what Johnny Depp wore a
Oh,
day
really?
ago. Yes. So like the next day she will wear something that's almost the same.
Yes, and I should stop and say, it's almost like an impossible situation as a woman in court. Like, I want to acknowledge this because, like, he could show up in just like navy blue suits every day and like people could give a flying flip or whatever. But like, suits are not made originally for women, so there's already like a weirdness there of like a kind of, you're like adopting this masculine associated clothing that was like, keeping you down and oppressed this whole time or whatever. And now you're trying to reclaim it all while being like sued by this dude. So like, it was an impossible situation, but I kind of like, just watching it, you're like, she just seems to be, I don't know. She just, I mean, it's a bad situation, but because maybe she's in this bad situation, she kind of feels pressure to whatever, and she does not have enough of like, the thing that struck me is it just didn't seem like she had enough core sense of self to just be herself. Like, whereas people, I think, really felt like he was just being himself. Like, he had paid, probably like $5 million in order to like process through this litigation, and it was just because that's what he wanted to do. It's where he wanted to be. And so he was almost like on vacation. Yes, it's difficult and stuff to kind of do it, but like, it was just so much his choice. That was like the thing he wanted to spend his money on, whereas she's being like forced to kind of endure this type of thing. And she did not seem, I was just struck with like the lack of authenticity, right? And it's kind of what you have mentioned, like, she's posing for the camera and stuff, but it's like, well, does she have really any choice as a personality disordered individual? Like, could any personality disordered individual kind of go through something like that
Yes.
and be otherwise? Probably not. And that's why, we kind of talk about like, the worst place for a sociopath psychopath is to be in a situation that's unusual, like a funeral where you haven't had practice. You don't kind of know what's going on, and stuff could go like sideways real fast or whatever, where people are like, hold it, what? Selling babies? No. Where you're like, whoops, did I say that? No, I didn't mean it. Right, where you're just like, you're not as well used to wearing kind of a mask. So yeah, I get that. And I do kind of, even when she was talking, like, perhaps even more than the trial itself, like the few videos that I watched where she's kind of talking to him, like, you could tell there was some sort of altercation. She hit him, right? Or she said she hit him. And now she's kind of talking like so deadpan, like, oh, it wasn't a hit, it was a slap or whatever. It
No,
was
I
so,
did not punch you. I was hitting you.
yeah, just kind of
Not a
like so
punch.
matter of fact about it, and like not at all emotional. Like, you don't hear at least emotions in her voice, even though she could be, potentially emotional and stuff. Yeah, that was also. I think that's pretty chilling, I think, to people, like, for people who do mask, and I think a lot of personality disordered people mask, at least to a certain extent,
Mhm.
then to hear them unmasked is, like, weird, you know? And,
Yeah,
I kind of am like, did she do so many bad things? I don't think she should be villainized as much as some people are villainizing her. Like, it you know, I everybody who suffers from a personality disorder suffers, is a
yeah,
one good thing to do. And like if your partner is, I mean, some people are better able to be partnered with personality disordered people and be helpful and supportive without being enabling, and others no. And sort of, I'm not saying this is what happened in this situation, but often, let's say she is borderline personality disorder, and she just kind of becomes your uh, perfect girlfriend or perfect wife or whatever, like Stepford Wives it, at least for a little bit. Like, that's a little bit on you to expect that in your partner, to expect, them to, like, adapt to you. Like, I'm a little bit like, you didn't get red flagged at all, when she was just like, you just thought you were, like, the luckiest dude to, like, have somebody who was, like, perfectly matched, and that's kind of was your thing. I'm not, like, victim blaming Johnny either, but it's like, well, like, what, like, um
yeah. Like
if he was
what?
better educated maybe about like personality disorders. And that's another, it's kind of like the pedophilia thing. Like if everybody was better educated about personality disorders, there we probably just would have like better results, because they'd be like, okay, I see that you're struggling, and I can see that you're struggling because you are masking towards me. You're white knuckling, you're pretending, you're this, rather than just go along and be like, this is the best weekend we've ever had. You could be like, no, these are actually signs that they're in distress, so it's just a
Yeah,
complicated situation.
from
Did you
from what I see, what I saw from the trial, it seems like all things started going downhill when Deb wanted the prenup.
mm,
So it's probably that's when the fear of abandonment
oh yeah,
kicking in,
yeah,
because yeah, that's very typical of borderline personality disorder. Just I'm just saying from my own experience of people with this diagnosis around me. I don't know
mhm,
if it's true for everyone.
no.
Yep.
And it's so hard, like fear of abandonment. I mean, like, it's not something that she can control, especially in that moment, right? It would be something that she would have had. It's kind of like when people around me that I know have anxiety, or even panic disorders, like they cannot control the anxiety in that moment. It's like, maybe they can for sure, but I thought, my therapist one time said that, like, this person cannot change this behavior, not right now at least. They can through therapy, and they can whatever, they can change some
Yeah.
of the triggers, but it reminds me, like, I think I've mentioned this before. I now live with an opossum
Hmm.
who lives under the deck.
Yeah.
And I've encountered this opossum now like several times, and each time I see it, uh, Craigette, Craig originally, but then the opossum had babies, so obviously it's female, so Craigette. I like literally jump out of my skin. It's like, I have such a strong phobia that I'm like, oh, and then I'm like jumping in midair, like trying to like, now my conscious mind knows the opossum's not a threat. Right, but there's something just like uncontrollable, and I think sometimes we do ourselves and others a disservice by just not acknowledging that, that's something that's really uncontrollable for me. I can calm down, and like the other day I even took videos of the baby because I was like, okay, it is pretty cute, and what? It just went through that chain link fence. I thought it was too fat for it, but it was just like went right through. That's cool. Like, but there are other things that aren't controllable that we really cannot control.
Yeah.
And
So my theory is that people are so repulsed by Amber Heard right now is because she did not seem to take any accountability.
oh,
She wanted to uphold this image where she did no wrong. It was all Johnny Depp. Whereas Johnny Depp's approach to the trial is, yes, I'm not perfect. I do have an alcohol addiction, drug addiction, but never once I lay a hand on her.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's hard to fault Amber Heard in a way for being like I have to, act perfect, because that kind of is where society is now a lot, at least superficial. Like if you did have a tweet from 2010 that was a little sideways, then like no, you're a baddie, you're done.
Yeah.
Right? So is it like easy to kind of acknowledge that we have struggled with things? I think it's gotten more difficult, and that's kind of a weird backsliding. Speaking of backsliding, that backsliding is just as concerning to me as like abortion rights or whatever. Right?
Yeah. And also, like you mentioned, Arya said that yes, she's lying, but does she know that she's lying? So
Mm-hmm.
it's, to me, it might not be that she doesn't want to take accountability.
Yeah.
She might really be just not aware that she is perhaps as equally guilty, if not more.
Yeah, and like this kind of like reminds me, getting back to the study you talked about where they wrote down their political beliefs, and then 6 months later they're like trying to defend the opposite because they've
Yeah.
been tricked, right? So it's like it's not something that is so far out of the realm of what other people experience. Even I'm sure I experience it. These moments of kind of just like in my own personal reality, there's delusion, right? Like the other day, I was trying to remember like the story of my niece, right? And then I was like, you know what? Let me try to get this right. So I had to go back and listen to the YouTube. My niece filling up the kiddie pool at the beach, right? Because I was like, I kind of don't remember anymore. And I think I've mentioned this before. I have a memory of the Haagen-Dazs truck breaking down outside my elementary school, and then we had to eat the ice cream because it was melting, and I got like pralines and cream, and I was like, this is definitely an old person flavor ice cream. Like, why did they put nuts in here? That doesn't make sense. But still, I'm kind of now, I'm like, did that happen? Like, I've just kind of remembered it so frequently that I don't trust my memory anymore of it.
Yeah.
So I totally get this. Like, she may be lying in a way that seemed like she wasn't lying. Or like and compartmentalizing too, from personality disorder. Like, you don't have like a very integrated experience of self, and so your memories and your beliefs aren't going to be super integrated or consistent either.
I have a first-hand experience with this with my father. I don't know if I've mentioned this, but yeah, so he is to me a textbook narcissist. And so
Narcissist, you said?
yes,
Uh-huh.
narcissist. So one time, I don't remember why we got into that conversation again. He was just he has been mad or sad or upset about us excluding him from any wedding planning, because at the time he was in the middle of separating with my mom, and also maybe at his peak of alcohol addiction, and I was not back in the country where the reception is to be held, where I came from, but I was not there.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of like decision making, he was just not part of it. And for like traditional wedding, the groom's family has to like come meet the bride's family and pay like a dowry.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted it to not happen just among the parents, because we were not back in our home country. We were here in the US. So we wanted to wait until we were back. And my father got angry because he said it should have happened the moment we know that the wedding reception is happening.
Okay.
So I immediately told my parents-in-law to have it done. But when they did it, my father did not show up. And
okay.
yes, he was the one who requested it, and we informed him, and he did not show up.
Mhm.
He said I wasn't feeling the best. I was like, fighting with your mom, I don't feel like showing up. So he did not show up. And
Uh-huh.
then 1 year later, I think he got drunk and then started texting me like angry texts and say, "Oh, I was excluded from all your like wedding decision making. Like no one even invited me to the dowry thing, and uh, you all purposely did not tell me the date and day when it happened so that I could miss it." And I just pull out my previous conversation with him where he told me he's not going to show up. And I sent him a screenshot.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "No, we did tell you. See, you responded. You say you're not showing up." And he
Uh-huh.
insisted that we did not tell him. So after I sent that screenshot, he's like confused and stopped responding for a while. And then eventually he said, "Oh, just let bygone be bygone."
Oh, okay. That's good that he kind of like acknowledged it afterwards. He wasn't like, this is fake news. Like you
Yeah,
photoshopped this text conversation or something.
yeah. But I do think that he did not know that he had a fake memory of it. I don't think he
Mm.
was lying to, you know.
Oh yeah. In fact, I just was reading a little bit about another study. You have a fake memory of getting lost in a mall, and that study has been like replicated several times. That they're able to implant a fake memory of people getting lost in a mall as a child. I'm like, oof, this is like spooky. Spook. That's what my little nephew says when he gets scared. Who knows how he learned that, but that was like one of his first 20 words to be like, I'm scared, please help me. Like spook, spook.
Yeah. So like a lot of this like fake memory stuff, it's not it's not that we intentionally lie, especially with personality disorder people.
Mhm.
Like I don't want to say that they don't have to pay for it, but really it's not so much in their control.
Yeah. Yeah, like how can you be it reminds me a little bit. Have you seen the movie Memento?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, reminds me of Memento, where it's like, okay, yeah, this dude is kind of making choices to like trick him here and there, and I've been in relationships too. Like one where my therapist was like, well, like it's just convenient that all of these disordered things end up like working towards this person's benefit. Like you just have to like wonder, if there isn't something, at least like a defense mechanism or something that's pushing things. But yeah, to say that they're in your conscious control, yeah, they probably aren't in the conscious control. So you're like, well, like I don't even know that. And this is a problem in the law too, is that there's been plenty of instances in which people have been like, yeah, what's the worst example I've ever heard of? Like I hear these in my little continuing legal education seminars. One of them from an innocence project was talking about this woman who got raped for like 8 minutes. She got raped, and during those 8 minutes, she just thought, every second of this rape, I'm just going to study this person's face, the face of my rapist, so that way after this is done, I will be able to identify the face of the rapist, right? And then they end up catching the suspect. The suspect, she identifies the suspect. Yes, this is my rapist. And then he goes to prison for 15 years, and then DNA clears him completely, and it
Mm-hmm.
was some other African American individual. And you're like,
Yes.
ugh, like to be the woman who's the rape victim, that's really hard in this instance. You did your best, but you sent somebody to prison for 15 years in a racist way that, like they were completely innocent. And you allowed this other dude to just kind of like walk out. Like the one thing she wanted to have happen from the rape, that this person would like, suffer the consequences, just didn't. Like I think her rapist ended up dying even. So he never even was like convicted or charged with the rape, because he was already dead by the time that like they had done the DNA evidence to clear this particular individual. So it's kind of like that type of situation where it's like it's easy to judge maybe somebody like Amber Heard or whatever else, but it's like, okay, but all of you would be in that same situation. Like, I don't think there's a single human, personality disordered or non, who wouldn't be in that same situation because that's our brains are just garbage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I do think that she's obsessed with still having interaction with that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And most of it is coming from my own past relationship. Like
Uh-huh.
sometimes when I cannot get over a rejection, I would want to have any interaction ongoing, even if it's unpleasant. Like when I broke up with no when I experienced breaks up, I would want to haunt the people that I could not be in a relationship anymore, just so there's some sort of interaction still going on. I want to be someone that they could never forget
Mm.
or get free from. And my first failed relationship, I was just 17 or 18 at the time. I think one day I just got into this gray rage. I was having brunch with my friends, and I just suddenly thought about this ex. It was just, I think, within a month of breakup. I just got into this gray rage. I started walking towards his house for 1 hour with the intention of setting it on fire.
Huh.
Not because I wanted him harm or anything. I just wanted to do something so destructive that will haunt him for the rest of his life. And in my sick mind back then, it is kind of romantic.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean, I'm like I'm not coming up immediately with like a thought of my own where I had this experience, but like Arya has suggested like there's certain instances in which she kind of felt like, like the emotion, you have no kind of real healthy means of processing the emotion. And so she'd be like, if I was feeling bad, then she was like, then everybody has to feel bad.
I think for me, it's not so much I want people to feel as bad as I was feeling. It's more like I had to stop my brain going over the whole thing again and again, trying to think, is there something I missed? Is there a
Oh,
move that I could have taken to stop this undesired outcome? And I just could not tell my brain to stop. So I had to do something so beyond repair that my brain will think, that's it, there's nothing more you can do. The
huh.
bridge is burned. You cannot go back to it anymore. There's no hope. There's no point rethinking what move you could have done or what move you should be doing now or what would have saved the situation. Like just get it so bad that there's no point thinking about it. It like from now on it's a waste of time. Just move on.
Yeah, and that should kind of like not be too different. Like I've heard normal people be like, if I thought a relationship was going to go bad or that I would be rejected, then I would sabotage it. In a way, it's the same, except it's not a concern about rejection at all. It's like, no, the brain needs to stop, stop thinking about
Yes.
this. That's interesting. I've never kind of really thought about like, so like a psychopath mind, especially I would say like successful, kind of so-called successful psychopaths who, and by that I mean largely just like, I don't know, there's not a real definition there. But like they tend to orchestrate, as you've kind of have demonstrated, and tend to kind of like think if I only just do XYZ, then like I'll be able to manipulate or orchestrate or get enough people to support me or to do this or to do whatever other thing. And so after like that has ended in a way that maybe you haven't predicted or felt like you orchestrated too, then it's like the brain's still stuck in that loop though. Like that's part of the disorder is that the brain gets in these compulsive loops of orchestrating and like sense that you can and should be able to orchestrate things, and then that's the way that you're going to feel okay, or feel good about your life. But then if that kind of gets disrupted, then like there's not like a good fail safe there. Does that sound kind of right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's not like a kill switch. So you have to make up a kill switch, which would be burning down the house.
So that I can regain my control
Yeah, regain the
over
control.
my own thoughts and my life in a way. So that was what I thought when I, spoiler alert, watched Killing Eve when Villanelle set her house on fire
Oh,
to kill her mother.
yeah. You know, I
Yeah,
wondered about that because I was like, Arya also really loved that episode and was that whole kind of like story arc or whatever. And I was like, I don't get it like quite as much as she is getting it. Like, why does she have to kill the mom?
yeah, it's to kill all hopes. So you won't be thinking, how else can I orchestrate this?
Hmm, that's interesting.
Yeah, I have very murderous impulses towards some other people
Mm-hmm.
in my life, and it's not so much that I hate them or want want them to be hurt or want, I don't know, revenge in a sense. And I think people will think that psychopaths do this out of revenge, but to me it's more like you have no use to me anymore, but your existence kind of hurt me
Mm-hmm.
or people I love, people around you. So why not we put an end to it?
Yeah, it's like taking out a splinter from your skin.
Yes.
Yeah, like let's just get rid of this and then it should be able to go back to normal. Yeah, because you're trying to, it's funny because psychopaths, like speaking of compartmentalization, I was thinking about this the other day. It's like I was so carefree, but it doesn't mean that I actually never was worried, you know, like in my early 20s or whatever. It's just that I was so it was so easy to kind of compartmentalize the bad times, you know, and just be like, no, we can just get back to normal real quick. Like, don't worry, watch, we'll just get back to normal. And I always was able to get back to normal, but like, yeah, if you're stuck a little bit and you're having a hard time getting back to normal, I don't think you do know how to get back to normal because it's like, well, normally it just happens or whatever. And so maybe you'd be like, well, I'd have to do this, this, or that in order for it to get back to normal. It's interesting. I often think, you know, like these people that kill for love or whatever, you're like, man, what is the motivation there? But I really wish that people would explore it a little bit more like we're exploring it now because if you understand, like, there's the behavior, which is just killing, right? Or the imagined killing, but then the motivations can be so different for
Yes,
things.
it's not out of bloodlust for all cases.
Hmm.
People just kind of assume that it's out of bloodlust. No, a lot, I think for psychopath, a lot of it is just utility.
And just kind of like like that, yeah, that's just like if that's the kill switch, then you're like, sure, then that's what needs to happen or something. But so tell me why you think Amber Heard uh is maybe this way or is this way with Johnny Depp.
I don't know how her childhood is like, what she has gone through, but I could see myself being as obsessed
Mm.
that
Yeah,
I just want someone to still pay me attention. Like you are not going to just discard me
I
or
see.
abandon me.
So do you think this is why she accused him of abuse?
I don't think that will be the sole reason. I think it's probably a lot of combination, and the article she wrote was when Me Too movement was the most popular. So there could be financial gain.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and
But
she like
yeah,
ended up being connected with the ACLU, is that right? At the time, like they were kind of like, "Hey, publish this and then you can be an ambassador."
yes.
Yeah. So kind of like prestige. And sometimes it's like, okay, that went sideways or whatever, but let's see if we can make some lemonade out of some lemons here.
Yeah, but like looking back at the time point where the article was published, my guess would be Johnny Depp stopped any interaction with her.
Uh,
Has stopped, maybe has stopped interacting with her for a while, and she wanted to get him to respond.
mm.
So she did something
Hmm.
bad enough that he would have to.
That's interesting. What else about Amber Heard? Do we have more?
I can talk about my last manipulative relationship
Okay.
that got me a little, got me in a little trouble. So this this person is married, and he did not tell me that when we started dating. And this whole time, my spouse also is aware of the relationship because we're polyamory.
Uh-huh.
And the longer I keep dating this person, the more I find out that he's married and his wife is not aware of the situation, and he's also lying to me. He was the one who asked me to stop dating other people and said he would do the same, but he did not. And it's just a lot of lies after lies after lies. And eventually I felt that nothing I did was ever going to get me the truth. I was very fixated on honesty at the time because I want truth. I felt like I don't know the nature of the relationship if I don't know everything that's going on, but he would just not give me that. So I started sending anonymous tips to his wife about his infidelity, but he never once suspected it was me.
Huh.
Because I never had any argument or expressed any unpleasant feelings with him, that it did not even cross his mind that it could have been me. So this went on for, I think, a year while I was still dating him. And eventually I just got so fed up and I ended the relationship, but we were still friends. And I think that's when he gets suspicious and stopped interacting with me so much. So every now and then, when I felt like he wasn't going to interact with me, I would send another anonymous tips just to rile things up a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, he stopped interacting with me for good, because at that point he was like maybe already ruling out other possibility that it's not me. Like it's down to just, it must have been me. It couldn't be anyone else. So he stopped interacting with me, and I just told his wife everything in a letter with all evidence, how he's been cheating on her, how he did not get caught. So all his dirty tricks, so that she can check on him for all of this, or maybe get a divorce, like whatever she wanted to do. Like at that point, I did not care what she would do with him. I just want to tell her everything and then burn the bridge, and my mind will not be fixating on this anymore. So I did that. And then they went to the police and cops show up and said, "Oh, have you been doing this?" And I said, "No."
Me? No.
Yeah, the cops was not being precise about what was happening. He just said, "Do you know why I was here? Do you know this person?" I'm like, "Yeah." Did they tell you that they are getting harassed? And then they say yes. Have you been harassing them? I said no. But there's nothing criminal here because I did consult my lawyer friends.
Okay.
So I knew I was good and I was not obligated to say anything.
That's good advice for everybody. Don't say anything to the cops.
Yeah. So eventually the cops was like, yeah, he's been, being a jerk, like cheating and with a lot of people, blah, blah, blah. But I don't want this to escalate. So yada, yada. And then I was like, yeah, sure. Thanks for talking to me. But at that point, that even if the cops did not show up, I was not planning to do anything anymore because that was the purpose of me telling her everything, is that there's no more move I could plan and I should just like move on.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, yeah, there's no more move you can plan, and so then it's like your brain suddenly lets go because
Yes.
because as long as there are moves that you could plan, like if you're in that mindset, that kind of personality disordered mindset, then you will kind of like your brain has a really hard time getting out of that rut.
Yeah, and that's where I am coming from with Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp. It just reminds me so much of the time when I was stuck in a loop. And I wonder how much of this is true for
That she,
her.
oh yeah. It is really hard. This is like maybe a good segue to intuition,
Mhm.
although we've going for a little while. I can feel my bladder pressure, so we shouldn't go too long. Maybe we'll talk more about intuition another time, but it is like speaking of this, like how do you know, like you wonder if this is for her. And like I actually use my intuition a lot to kind of ask questions about other people. Like what is the deal with this? Do they feel do they still remember this situation? How do they feel about this situation? Sometimes things that are like in my own personal sphere and sometimes not. And it's really tricky. Like I felt like I don't know if I've like ever said this kind of like fully. Like as a child, like I think it's way. I thought it was such a good way to put it. Was like you could just tell that people were repulsed by you, like the parts of you. And so
Yep.
then you just had to like kind of mask those certain parts of you. And one of the parts that people always seem to be repulsed with me about is that I just wanted to know certain things about people, like this one's a weird one, but the other day I was like wondering, like, why does my nephew have such a large penis? Like, I wondered like about the penis sizes of basically everybody I knew, right? And that can kind of seem repulsive, although it just comes from a place of like not anything. It's not sexual, right? But to you can imagine like a small child like not understanding like certain things are not to be asked about or talked about or something, or they're
Mhm.
private or whatever. But now I just this idea that like every part of you that is an actual part of you, like I just feel like this is true just from my own experience. You will find like a means of expression of that part of you. Like you'll be able to incorporate all aspects of your identity into like your daily life. You just have to kind of like be determined about doing it, and be like, I'm not going to settle for less. And one of the ways that I have kind of filled in the gaps there with my need to know is intuition. Like this morning during my kind of insomnia, I just like I forget what I was thinking about. Probably thinking about like the musical I watched last night or something, like these historical figures. Like, did this happen? Did they really do this? Like, did they really care about this? Was that their motivation for things? Just kind of like processing through the world with intuition. And the way that my intuition works is like I just ask it yes or no questions. And like I will feel like if it's a yes, then I get like this like sensation that can be like so kind of like overwhelming, like gut punch kind of intuition. This is how Arya says too, like just kind of like hit you like this to where I can like even wince. So Arya knows if I've asked intuition a question and gotten a yes, because I'll like usually like have some sort of twitch in my eye, and it's just like this kind of sense. But the weird thing about intuition for me is like it's not literal. Like it's not like, let's say intuition's like, yeah, that dude that has a 10-inch penis. Like it may or may not be true. Right? But there's just something about kind of the processing through things. Like often it is true. Like the other day, man, what was it? Intuition told me like where to put the umbrella on the beach. It was like, yeah, put the umbrella here. And I was like, oh, really? Not here? Okay, sure. I'll put the umbrella here. And then like later in the day, like the way that the kind of like sun moved and whatever, like the shade, it ended up being like perfect for like 2 hours later, like still perfect in like a way. Otherwise I would have like, encroached on like the little lifeguard path or whatever. So I was like, oh, that was like weird. How intuition told me that. And who knows what that means, but other things it's like, no, it's not literally true that that is happening or something. But also sometimes I think intuition just, I mean, I'm asking it yes or no questions for the most part is how I do it. But intuition's often uh like let's say if it's like the question's kind of wrong, right? Like the question is like, there is not a yes or no answer. Like intuition will just get the closest sometimes, right? Like give you a yes because like, yeah, kind of close enough, or no, you don't need to worry about it, or yeah, that's the gist, or like it's something like that. It's not that, but it's something like that, and you'll still kind of get yes. So, like there's still like a lot of trial and error with like trying to consult my intuition, but there have been instances, and it definitely gives me such a feeling of peace in
Yes.
instances, yeah, where I think, to replace the compulsive mindset of everything needs to be orchestrated and what are my next moves, you have to replace it with something. And in my opinion, I felt like I had to replace it with something and to kind of just go to intuition. And I'll ask intuition sometimes, like, is this even something I need to be worried about? And intuition will be like, no. And then I just feel like I can just like let go of it and not have to like worry about it. Whereas I see other people, for instance, like my dad or something, like I use it in the law a lot, in my law practice, like, is this deal going to work? Oh, it is. Okay, good. Do we need to worry about this? No. So let's not research this, right? Because it's it's not something we need to be worried about. Whereas he's so kind of like he'll wake up in the middle of the night, worrying about stuff and be like, oh, what if this falls through or whatever. And so it just that's kind of been my experience with intuition. How about you?
Have you always had this, or is it?
So I did, but I kind of like in a lot of ways, like writing the second book, I kind of have been thinking more like, because I talk about like weak sense of self, and I say, basically didn't reliably self-express, but had to kind of admit like, yeah, I did self-express sometimes, but it was like accidental. And it was like I kind of wasn't able to identify it for what it was or something. And I think same thing with intuition is that I would sometimes get like a clue like, hey, you need to get out of this place or whatever, like you are in danger, stuff like that often where it was, maybe one of these like gut punch intuition kind of messages, and that was like strong enough for me to listen. But now probably back then maybe I kind of listened to intuition like a few times a year. And now I like ask intuition questions like throughout the day. I mean, like several times an hour, probably.
Yeah. So my take on intuition is, I think everyone has it, as long as you don't let your ego mind
Mm,
obstruct it, then it can do wonderful things for you. But a lot of people are just so used to fear or worry, anxiety, and when that interfere with your intuitive processing, you kind of want to fall back on cognitive or logic because those are more reliable. Those which step you got wrong. Like it's easier for you to troubleshoot
mm-hmm.
a logical process than an intuitive process.
Yeah,
That's why most
that's a
people,
great way to put it. I get so
yeah.
frustrated when I'm trying to troubleshoot intuition. I'm like, intuition, you lied to me.
Yeah, and sometimes intuition lies to us because there's a lesson there.
Yeah, or something. There's something, and then it's like you have to use intuition to figure out why.
Yes, yes, and it's not easy to access intuition when you're, I think, very stuck in psychopathy because you want everything to be orchestrated perfectly. You're not able to have another outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
as it falls away, as you're more open to life, more open to whatever happens, I have this inner peace, I have this inner control of everything is the way it's meant to be. That's when intuition can speak through you.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like, from a religious perspective, like, I think people have asked me before, like, I associate it with, like, the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost, like, with a spiritual kind of manifestation of deity, essentially. Like, and it has, to me, because of that, probably like a personality, but like one kind of like theologically, like in Christianity, some of the things that you hear, especially maybe Mormonism, I can't remember where some of these scriptures are coming from, Mormon scriptures or Christian scriptures, but they talk about how like they're like it's a still small voice, right? It's a voice that you have to be very quiet to listen to, and if you're
Yes.
angry, you can't listen to it, and if you're like really caught up in your own kind of, as you say, ego mind, you can't listen to it. You really have to like stop. And I think that's one thing that meditation, like I listen to intuition best when my mind is really still
Quiet.
kind of like, yes, and kind of like free. Like I probably listen best during my insomnia because I think I'm still kind of like a little bit in that dreamlike state. I'm not in this rigid, I control things, I'm acting, I'm like in bed and I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking, but I'm not my usual thinking in which it's like, okay, here's what we're doing, now this, now that.
Yeah, like the conversation you have with, I think it's pretty morbid.
Mm-hmm.
That you, when you're falling back from acting and more just being,
Yeah.
I think that's when you can hear because your mind chatters is not interrupting.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it is hard because often intuition is telling you stuff, uh, like let's say you're not religious at all. Probably like the best explanation of intuition is telling you stuff that your current attentional focus is not allowing you to see, right? Like you're so hyper focused on X or something, and your senses have picked up on Y, but you like you're kind of like your, what do we say, super ego or whatever, like your dominant mind, your conscious mind is
Yes.
not allowing that information to come in because it doesn't fit your kind of preconceived notion about what should be happening or what you should be paying attention to or whatever. So intuition is almost always telling you something that you probably notice but are not aware of, is a good way to put it. It's making
Yes.
you aware of something that your awareness was like lacking in before. So I intentionally, if I'm really trying to like get a solution with intuition, I'll be like, I need to like, I'll think, open your mind, open your mind. Like it's not just this, it could be other things. Like the universe is like dark matter, like think about all these like
Yeah.
weird things about physics. Like you don't know anything, like is there gravity? Maybe, right? Like
Yes.
just kind of like release your mind from like all your expectations about how you think you understand, like the certainty. And that's kind of the big rub, I
All the
think.
beliefs.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Preconceptions.
psychologically, yeah,
Hmm.
psychologically, it's probably subconscious processing,
Hmm.
like driving. Like we drive the same path every day, so you can be not paying attention to the road or where to go, where to turn, and you will still, your body will know how to do it. So
Hmm.
that's a lot like intuition. But spiritually speaking, it's also like a collective intellectual, that
Hmm.
where when you are very still, very silent, when you are not so caught up in the survival of just this body and this being, but a more collective one, then you allow yourself to be aligned with the truth.
Hmm.
When you are not just trying to maximize your own benefits and your own survival, then you will not be bothered by fear and anxiety. And you will just yeah, you're just sending out a message that tell me what action would be most aligned.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, again, like, for people who have like a hard thing with spirituality, so I took like a music acoustics of music and speech class. That was like my science class as a music major. But it was super interesting because you're like learning like, okay, yeah, what are sound waves? What's the nature of sound waves? And just like why does the human ear perceive certain sound wave, like we have like our perceived
Yeah,
pitches are like
yeah.
within a range. Same thing with like the visual spectrum. And it's like to just understand that, like, no, there's actually like a bunch of shit happening
Mm-hmm.
that's just beyond the spectrum or whatever. Sometimes that helps me to open my mind too, to be like, like already I'm filtering, like down to like 3% of what's actually happening. My ears can't hear lower or higher than this. My eyes can't see lower than or higher than this. My brain cannot focus lower or higher than this. It's just kind of like understanding that there's just so much going on around you.
Yeah,
But I do think there's an aesthetic for truth, and I think that's when I was listening to you say like a collective, like tuning into the collective. Sometimes I think, well, like there is a truth to the fact that we are a little bit collective, a little or a lot. There's like a kind of a duality between, I think, individualism, collectivism in terms of
there's only
existence.
one.
Yeah, well, we live in like a biosphere or whatever, right?
Yeah,
We are part of a living
yes,
organism,
or
which is
entity or whatever.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly. The human race, whatever it is, we're both individuals, and it's kind of like saying like your cells, they're the individual
yes,
cells, but they're also part of something else, and we're part of a universe, and we're part of
yes.
etc. Solar system. So there is actually a logical connection, and then it just kind of like open up your mind to like beyond yourself to like the broader pieces of you that
Yeah,
exist.
even beyond logic.
Hmm.
And yeah, like some people are against like spirituality,
Hmm.
but really its definition is just that there are a lot more dimensions of life that is beyond our perception.
Hmm.
That's all it means. It's not the bad name that all this like fraud that has been happening to it. It's just you being aware that there are more dimensions that you will be humbled by when
And
you're open to it.
yes, and it's like E equals MC squared, like matter is connected to energy anyways. And so like the idea that, like there are energies. Like I have a relative who I'm kind of like, oh, okay, like you're whatever aura or something, here and there I'm
Mm,
like, all right, that's what's happening, okay. But I don't know, like I do think that keeping your mind open, well, it's a little bit too like I think I've talked before about like the scarcity versus abundance
abundance.
mindset.
Yep.
Yeah. Like if you just kind of understand, like as someone who's like traded stocks for the past couple decades, I guess most all of my adult life, then you can kind of see like, wow, okay, if I had bought this, then this, and the fact that I did buy this, then that, and you just kind of realize that they're little in a way that's hard to see sometimes in other, less kind of cut and dry situations. You just see that there are choices that you could have made that would have made you a billionaire. And then you're kind of like, well, then if that's possible, then like, why do I feel like it's impossible to be a billionaire? It's clearly possible, And so you just kind of like, it's like the possibilities to open up in a way that's really expansive. And I think I've mentioned this before, like I feel really lucky to live close to the beach. And it's just like again came about from just listening to intuition, like it was just like a bunch of different kind of like things like all lining up together. And it was something that is just like not something I could have orchestrated to.
Yes.
Like I wouldn't have even been able to see. It had too many turns. It was like too many blind turns in which I was like, okay, I guess I'm just doing this right now. That I couldn't have seen the end from the beginning if I wanted to. And so I think when you think about that, like if you're not listening to intuition, you're cutting yourself off from all the possibilities that you can't even imagine. which are like far exceed the number of possibilities you can imagine. So it's like you're playing a bad numbers game because you're like,
Yeah, and
no,
also a good way to put it is life is going to happen as is as it intended anyway. So you can choose whether to be dragged along or
mm, mm-hmm.
surrender to it and embrace it.
Yeah, there is
So
some.
it, yeah,
There's something weird about intuition. There almost seems to be, and it makes sense because they're just like zeitgeisty currents or whatever of like things that are just easier to do in one way than there are another way, just in every given moment, right? And we tap into this sometimes with people being like how to win friends and influence people, or how to whatever, or how,
yes,
But really, what it's kind of trying to say is like if you can kind of be in tune enough with what's happening around you, you can go with the current and go much further than you can go if you're just like I'm going to swim against the current. Now, it almost is weird because it's uh like are you being less true to yourself? No, you are being more true to yourself. And this is kind of why we mentioned it earlier is like before, if somebody was like, just be yourself in this trial, Amber Heard, if I was Amber Heard, I'd be like, I don't know what that means.
yeah,
Be
yeah,
true to yourself, right? Like that's why I'm just like, like grasping at whatever whatever things I can in order to try to do my best here to not look bad or whatever. Like that would be kind of the way I'd be thinking. But like intuition like really helps to be like, no, go ahead and act in this contrarian way. And if there's one thing that I think is really interesting economics wise is that often people who like they like reach for the stars or something and they're like applying to like a job that's way out of their reach or they like
mhm,
leave for Hollywood or whatever. Often if it's like so thought so unlikely, those people can have success just because there's such little competition. Like there's so few people who are actually taking such big risks in these situations, in which it does there, nobody can see like why do people kind of become like doctors, lawyers, and then just kind of lockstep? Like most of my law school classmates are this way, and like good for them, and they all have nice lives and cool things that they've done and stuff. But I don't think there's a single one of them that isn't jealous of me and thinks that my life is better even though I've made such crazy choices, right? Like that there was no way I could have foreseen, like having like this happy lifestyle, but now they're like, oh, I think they almost feel a little bit like why did I make the safe choices every time? Like what did it get me? Maybe I could have also just been living my truth instead and then
yes,
seeing how that played out.
yeah. I think you struck a chord about staying true to yourself because I'm just wondering. I had always been wondering why my brain was just so fixated on rejection or orchestrating what move I could do. I
Right.
think it's because the whole time, like the whole relationship, I was just focusing on the outcome.
Mm,
And when that falls through, then I have nothing to fall back on because I felt like I invested so much. I invented a persona for you. Every decision making was to get me this decision that I want. And now this relationship is not moving forward. It's just ending. And what do I do with this version of self that I have created?
mm,
How do I live with all these decisions that at the time might not be what I wanted?
yeah.
I was just doing them to get this outcome, but now I don't get the outcome and I did not stay true with myself when I made all these decisions. So everything is just you're just telling me to cut the losses and just move on right now. It just seems my brain did not like that.
Yeah, I can see, so this like musical that I saw too, I think I mentioned that it like deals with a little bit the Russian Revolution And these people, some of the characters were like aristocracy during the Russian Revolution. So one of them gets like arrested and stuff. This must have been before they got really efficient about arresting people, because eventually this person gets out of jail, which is not my understanding of how things were under Stalin. Like people did not get out of the gulag ever. But then they end up in Paris, and the woman is kind of talking about, like, when I was growing up, I was part of the aristocracy and I wanted to do all these things. And my dad was like, no, like a lady doesn't do those types of things. And she's like, now that I'm not a lady anymore, though, like maybe I can just be a woman and kind of do the things that I wanted to do. And so I think it was an interesting like idea of like you think that you're kind of orchestrating and you make all these deals with the devil, so to speak, like, okay, I'm going to enjoy this nice, comfortable life if I, just like deny my identity in XYZ ways and just like white knuckle it and just kind of like, like golden handcuffs is what we call them a lot in the law. Is you getting paid to just kind of like, stifle your will to live a little bit down low enough to where you can like perform this type of work instead for, a lot of money. And yeah. I mean, luckily, I think that I don't know why. There's almost something about my personality disorder that was like, no, we can do that for a little bit just to get some cash for the stock market or whatever and to pay off our student loans, but we got to get out of this. But I do feel badly for other people who kind of get caught up in it. They get so caught up in it. And this was another lyric she was talking about, like, women, she's like, yeah, I can't be seen to be ambitious or whatever. And somebody was like, oh, because men, they don't want to be replaced or whatever. And she's like, women can be just as bad act just as badly towards other women who are ambitious, because they are resentful that that woman got out of the cage and they're still in the cage. Right. So I thought it's interesting to think about like these things, like a cage protects you from like the lions outside, but you're still in a cage or whatever, like the classic kind of bird in a cage type things. And the nice thing about intuition is it really is the only way I can think of to reliably improve your life from that cage. Like you could get out of the cage, but then like there's a reason why you went in the cage. It's the lion, right? But how can you reliably get out of the cage and not have to worry about the lion anymore? The only way that I know of is intuition.
Yeah, and intuition is what the replacement is.
Yeah, yeah.
And if people want like a quick solution to opening up your mind, just do psychedelics.
Oh yeah, psychedelics. So what specific psychedelic was it again?
Shrooms.
Shrooms. Okay. Do you know which shrooms?
Yes. I don't know.
I always try to give people the specifics because that's how I always was like, I need to know the exact whatever and dosage and whatever.
No, whatever the local dealer is selling.
I think I have a stock in Magic Mushroom like company or whatever. Like it's really kind of crazy. I do think I have to caution though. Yes, that's a good one, but there was at least one person that I've met who did that and kind of mentioned like it kind of melted his psychopathy a little bit, but then like was what like seemed like psychosis to me.
Was
And
it Brad with LSD?
oh, I can't really say. Yeah, where I was just like, oh, okay, that's a huge caveat, is because it's just an anecdote, but an anecdote just shows that it could happen. Like, who knows whether there was existing, or who even knows if this is actual reality. It's just kind of where I was like, huh, is this happening? And yeah, it's so maybe don't try that the very first one. Maybe try meditation first, see if you can tap into meditation, and then or like just beware, I guess, buyer beware about that.
Yes,
Hopefully there'll be
it's
like
it's very risky, especially if you have a lot of like unprocessed trauma. So
mm,
I don't recommend people taking like a heroic dose. That's what they call it, heroic dose, before you know what you signed up for.
okay.
Because even me, when I did it, I already had been meditating for 1 year. and I was already in a happy place.
Mm-hmm.
Still, it, I think, sent me into depression.
Really? How long
Yes,
was the depression?
maybe 2 months at least.
Wow. That's crazy. But you still think it was worth it?
It's worth it because it uncovered a lot of things that I did not know I still need to work through.
I see. So it just kind of like it's like the pandemic. We say the pandemic sped up a lot of things like Zoom and work from home. So the shrooms just do that, like accelerate your growth
Yeah, and it made me question the reality I'm in
in a good
because,
way.
in a good way, yeah. Because before that, oneness and all this like intuition, everything, I just kind of know it intellectually, but not experientially.
Uh-huh.
Like intellectually, I know, oh yeah, we're all one, whatever, yada yada. No, still no conscience, no morality. I just intellectually know that yes, we are all one, and symbiotic relationship, whatever.
Uh-huh.
But with on psychedelic, it's the experience that yes, we are actually one.
Yeah, you can feel it. And
Yes, there's only one, and there's nothing else. There's no you and me. Everything is an illusion. This body that's talking to you is an illusion. You are an illusion.
mm-hmm.
Everything, like the whole grasp of reality, just falls apart. So when I came back to, I was shocked to a point that I get depressed. Like now everything is possible. I have so many choices now. What do I do with myself now?
I see. And so did you what how much did you feel intuition before the shrooms and then how much after?
I think much more after, but I cannot give you an answer on a scale.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Yeah.
I love scales. All right, yeah. So let let's keep talking about intuition, but I wonder if people have like questions or something they can ask. I wonder if here's something that's kind of stupid. So in the book, I like talk about the feedback loop a little bit, like, oh, you assess where you are, you try something different, you see how that happened, how it worked out, and then you like um I guess refresh your understanding of reality or what's happening, like research and develop like scientific method basically, right? And I was explaining it like to the nth degree in the book proposal, and my agent was like, "I think everybody gets it on the first time. It doesn't need to be 5 more pages of examples or whatever." So sometimes I have a bad like sense of what people are like of course duh intuition we don't need to hear about this versus like other people might be like no I don't know at all what you guys are talking about, so that'll be interesting to see. But thank you so much for chatting with me,
Yeah.
and so we'll chat soon.
Yep.
All right, talk to you soon.